In 2011, a group of teenagers picked up a can of spray paint and wrote a sentence on a wall. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a bomb. It was just words. But those words would ignite a war that would redraw the Middle East, collapse entire cities, pull in global superpowers, and leave over 500,000 people dead. This is not just a war story. This is a story of power, of survival, of betrayal, and of a country that became the battlefield of the world. Welcome to History Codex.
Before we begin, if you want deep cinematic stories that reveal how power, war, and history really shape our world, subscribe now to History Codex.
This is the Syrian Civil War, inside the most brutal war of the 21st century. For decades, Syria was ruled by one family. First, the father, then the son. When Hafez al-Assad took power in 1970, he didn't just become president. He built a system where loyalty meant survival and opposition meant disappearance. The state controlled everything: the military, intelligence, media, even fear itself. When he died in 2000, power passed to his son, Bashar al-Assad. At first there was hope. He was young, educated in the West, a doctor. People thought maybe this one would be different. But systems don't change easily. Behind the modern image, the same machinery remained. Surveillance, secret police, torture prisons. And beneath the surface, pressure was building. High unemployment, corruption, droughts that destroyed livelihoods, a growing population with no future. Syria wasn't stable. It was silent. And silence can be dangerous. March 2011. In the southern city of Daraa, teenagers wrote graffiti inspired by the Arab Spring. The people want the fall of the regime. It was a sentence already echoing across the Arab world. In Tunisia, governments fell. In Egypt, presidents stepped down. But Syria was different. The response wasn't reform. It was brutality. The boys were arrested, beaten, tortured. When their families protested, security forces opened fire. And that's when everything changed. Protests spread, from Daraa to Damascus to Homs. At first they were peaceful. People chanted, they marched, they demanded dignity. But the government responded the only way it knew how: force. Bullets replaced dialogue. And slowly, peaceful protest began to die. When people lose the right to speak, they often pick up weapons. By late 2011, non-defectors from the Syrian army began forming armed groups. They called themselves the Free Syrian Army. Their goal? Not chaos, not extremism, just one thing: to bring down Assad. But wars don't stay simple for long. Soon, Syria fractured into multiple battle lines. Government forces, rebel groups, Kurdish fighters, foreign-backed militias, each with different goals, different backers, different visions of Syria's future. And then, the world stepped in, not to stop the war, but to shape it. Syria became more than a civil war. It became a proxy war. On one side, Russia and Iran supporting Assad, providing weapons, funding, and military power. On the other, the United States, Turkey, Gulf nations, backing different rebel factions. Each power wasn't just fighting for Syria, yet they were fighting for influence, for control, for dominance in the Middle East. And as more players entered the game, the war became longer, deadlier, more complicated. Peace was no longer simple, because too many interests were now involved. In chaos, something darker emerged. A group that didn't just want to win the war, They wanted to reshape the world. ISIS, born from the ruins of Iraq, it swept into Syria like a storm, capturing cities, declaring a caliphate, imposing brutal rule, public executions, mass killings, fear as governance. For a moment, ISIS became one of the most powerful extremist groups in modern history. And suddenly, the war changed again. Now it wasn't just Assad versus rebels. It was governments, rebels, terror groups, foreign armies, all fighting at the same time in the same country. Syria had become a war of wars. Entire cities became symbols of destruction. Aleppo, once a thriving economic hub, reduced to rubble. Buildings collapsed into dust, streets emptied of life. Homs, called the capital of the revolution, besieged, bombarded, broken. Raqqa, turned into the capital of ISIS, then destroyed in the fight to reclaim it. War doesn't just kill people. It erases places, memories, histories, identities. And in Syria, it erased entire worlds. More than 500,000 people killed, millions injured, over half the country displaced, families torn apart, generations disrupted. Your refugees fled to neighboring countries and beyond. Some crossed oceans, some never made it. This became one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. And yet, for many outside Syria, it became just another headline. Today, the war hasn't truly ended. Assad remains in power, backed by allies. Parts of the country are still divided. Foreign troops remain. Tensions continue. The fighting has slowed, but the scars remain deep. Rebuilding Syria will take decades, if it ever fully happens. The Syrian Civil War didn't begin with bombs. It began with silence, with fear, with a system that refused to bend. And when it finally broke, it didn't just break a government, it broke a nation. And history will remember this war, not just for its brutality, but for what it revealed. That in the modern world, a single spark can still burn everything down. If you want more deep, cinematic breakdowns of history's most powerful events, subscribe to History, Codex. Because history isn't just the past, it's the story of how the world became what it is today.